Welcome to session 2 of Fundamentals for Designing Monitoring Results at GNI. This session is about the assessment and analysis. So at the end of this session, we hope that participants will be able to explain the purpose of the assessment and identify when it takes place within the GNI project cycle, describe the basic process of an assessment, and understand how to use the participatory appraisal process, or PAP, as a package of data collection tools, and also be able to explain the main tools that can be used for analyzing the assessment data. So last session, we provided a brief overview of the full cycle. We went through very briefly each step. Now let's take a closer look at each step of the cycle, along with the processes and tools and deliverables that are important for managing for results. So first, as we learned in the last session, we start with the assessment. So the assessment is an initial first step for the beginning of any project. The term is actually used to cover a range of processes and tools, and it's used for gathering information about the situation or the context in a community and identifying opportunities for project intervention. When we talk about the assessment, we're not just collecting data, we're also talking about a full analysis of the data that we've collected. Assessments should be participatory, and it should give the answers to questions such as what are the current conditions, what are the desired conditions, and what are the gaps. So why is the assessment an important first step in a project cycle? Well, it helps identify key issues and ensures design is based on the actual context and needs as opposed to just our assumptions. It also helps build consensus and understanding among stakeholders. It ensures that factors that could interfere with project success are considered in advance. And finally, it helps focus the scope of the project. So all of this allows for more effective targeted activity implementation and greater success in achieving results for the communities in which we work. So the process for the assessment will vary depending on the project. If you're doing a rapid assessment or a project identification for a new project, if you're doing a redesign assessment or annual planning, the process will vary. In this course, we're specifically referring to the assessment at the beginning of a new project. So the assessment process can be categorized into 3 main stages: preparation, data collection, and data analysis. And these will build from each other and lead the project team to the initial project design. And we'll discuss each step in more detail in the next few slides. So first is preparation. And this is an important time. It's important that proper time and consideration are allocated to this important stage in the planning of your assessment. So the preparation stage will involve some preliminary research, both secondary and primary data collection. It'll involve a stakeholder analysis. It'll involve designing your data collection tools and piloting those tools, and also training facilitators and enumerators. After proper preparation, then the team can actually collect data. And GNI recommends using the participatory appraisal process, the PAP, as the main method of information collection for the assessment. And finally, after data collection, then of course it needs to be analyzed. And so this stage should involve a general data analysis, followed by a problem analysis, and finally an objectives analysis. So this full process will then lead the project team to the identification of an initial project design concept. Now, stakeholder participation is essential in all parts of the project, and maybe none more so than the assessment. So stakeholders are any group or individual who can affect or is affected by the project activities and or achievement of the project objectives. So stakeholders can include the users, the partners, community-based organizations, community leaders, public or private service providers, donors, and other NGOs. So a stakeholder analysis, So a thorough stakeholder analysis should be conducted very on in the project cycle. A stakeholder analysis is a process of systematically gathering and analyzing qualitative information to determine whose interests should be taken into account when developing and or implementing a project. So it answers, who are the stakeholders? Why are they important for our project? Which ones have the priority? And how and when should we involve them in our project? So why is it so important that we involve stakeholders in our project? Well, it allows us to tap into their knowledge and experience. It allows us to get buy-in and support, which can lead to increased credibility and less resistance. Also help us gain more resources for success and sustainability. It can increase ownership and learning among partners, which can lead to more reliable data and more effort towards achieving those results that we identified, and also greater sustainability. And it ensures that stakeholders understand the core limitations and the themes of the project in advance. So it limits miscommunications and misunderstandings from the beginning. So after you've identified the information needs through your preliminary research and your stakeholder analysis, and before attempting to collect data, your team will want to develop a concise and detailed plan. So the plan should include the following. What information do we need? Where should we collect this information from? From whom should we collect the data from? Who should do the collection, and what kinds of tools and methods are we going to use? So it might require several stages of data collection going in and out of the field to get all of the information that you need. So within the assessment plan, you'll also want to include a schedule, and you'll need to consider sampling and representation from different groups of the community. So as you can see in this example from a Tonlak CDP in Vietnam, you can see the level of detail that you need to think about in planning for the assessment. So additional practical considerations for preparation of data collection include the designing of data collection tools as well as guidelines. So this helps ensure consistency and standardization and reliability of reporting over time and among different people. Guidelines can include a data management plan, including the set of procedures, people, skills, and equipment needed to systematically store and manage data. You'll also need to train your enumerators and facilitators. So this is to ensure a common understanding of the purpose of the overall assessment, ensure proper collection techniques, tools, and sources, and ensure ethical and culturally appropriate communication skills. So this last part of the preparation I can't emphasize enough. You have to pilot. So you need to test your tools and processes in order to detect problematic questions or techniques, verify collection times, identify potential ethical issues, and build the competence of data collectors. Now, after we've properly planned for the assessment, we can begin data collection. So to fully understand the project context, you might want to collect the following, but you're not limited to this data. You might want to collect on project stakeholders, community strengths, opportunities, and vision, successes and capacity, public services, the environment, community organization networks, other NGOs working in the area, infrastructure, legal, policy, and political institutions, and social and cultural conditions. You also want, if this is a project that has been working in the location before, you want to collect information on the previous development activities that GNI has been working on. So it's important to note that we don't need to assess every aspect of a community. You just need to assess what's relevant to your project. So data collection should be limited to what's relevant and what falls within the umbrella of GNI's mission. And specific data to collect is also outlined in the PPW. So at this point, we've done some preliminary research, but now we need to obtain the most important data, which is the insight or the voice from the community. Without this information, the project is not very likely to succeed. So for this, GNI recommends using the participatory appraisal process, or the PAP. The PAP is a package of data collection tools to gather and analyze information on community resources, problems, opportunities, and needs. It's designed to get community information on the project site from the voice of community members, and it provides a sense of community ownership and empowerment using key principles of open sharing, receptivity to different ideas, and adaptability. So you can find more detailed guidance on the PAP in GNI's assessment guide. So participatory appraisal is actually a very common practice in development. It's a family of approaches aimed at enabling local people to identify their own priorities and make their own decisions about the future. So it's GNI and GNI's project team members. It's our job to facilitate, listen, and learn. Now here is a list of all the tools found in the assessment toolkit in the PAP. Each tool has a different purpose and a different outcome. I'm not going to go through each one individually here. But as you can see, there are a lot of tools. But remember, you do not need to use every tool. Instead, the team should collect data using the appropriate combination of tools, which is relevant for the information you seek. And full guidelines and instructions for each tool in the PAP is available in GNI's PAP guideline and the guideline for CDP based on child sponsorship. So as I just mentioned, the full guidelines for each tool is available in some resources. But here are just a couple examples of common and very useful tools for the PAP. So here's one. It's community mapping. And this is an activity in which members of the community draw out a map of their community and the existing resources or assets. So the purpose of this is not to draw an accurate map, but to get an idea of local perceptions about the community and their resources. So you can cross-check this information by doing a walkthrough observation in the community as well. Here's another common and helpful tool, the seasonal calendar. So in this activity, participants identify and come to a consensus on the timing of important events and issues that affect their lives. So they list these out in a 12-month calendar. And the purpose is to gain an understanding of what affects the lives of the people in this community and when these take place. So knowing important events in their lives will be helpful for planning projects. So here are some things the group might explore. So we've discussed the data collection part of the assessment and where you can locate more in-depth guidance on data collection. However, the assessment is not complete after data collection. Of course, we need to do a thorough analysis of the results and interpret the meaning. So before the information collected can be made useful in guiding project design, the team must first compile and organize the data, carrying out a general analysis and interpretation. So very broadly, this process involves organizing and examining the data. So during this process, you're going to sort your data by sector, thematic area, location, whatever is relevant for your project. And you're going to categorize the data into patterns and themes. Then you'll want to cross-check your results from the different sources to make sure they're in line, and reduce the data to a manageable size, and again, select what is relevant only. So then the team will work to interpret the data and find meaning. So they'll want to answer questions such as, what is important in this data? Why is it important? What can be learned from it? And so what? So here we are, working our way from the assessment and towards project design. After carrying out the general results analysis, project teams will begin to make sense of the assessment findings. Since most projects are proposed to address a current issue or problem, a problem analysis, followed by an objectives analysis, can be conducted to help teams analyze assessment data and begin to guide the formation of an initial project design. So the problem analysis is a process that systematically explores causes and effects of core problems identified in the assessment. It helps determine real and current needs. It builds better understanding of underlying causes and development issues. It builds stakeholder consensus, and it helps establish the actual size of the problem and likely resources needed. So the problem analysis is often the first critical step towards project design. It helps identify where your project might intervene to address the problem. It identifies particular lines of intervention, and it helps draft an outline of the project design, including the activities that need to be undertaken, the goal, and the outcomes of the project. So the main tool used for problem analysis is the problem tree. And the problem tree represents a summary picture of the existing negative situation in the community. So it should be undertaken as a participatory activity. And from the results of the assessment, the team will want to identify a core problem. Then they're going to critically analyze that problem together and determine, why is that problem in the community? So what are the main causes? These will go below the problem in the tree as the roots. Then they'll want to analyze the effects of the problem, which will be placed above. So let's walk through and practice a simple problem tree example to demonstrate how this process goes. Okay, so let's say we have done an assessment and we've identified that in our community, women do not breastfeed their babies. So we got this information from maybe focus group discussions and key informant interviews. People have told us that women do not breastfeed their babies. So that's the core problem. Now we ask them, why do women not breastfeed their babies? Well, moms don't know that it's important to breastfeed. And why do they not know? Well, there's no education materials or campaigns available on breastfeeding and the importance of it. Why else might women not breastfeed their babies? Well, there's a lack of support for moms who have problems with breastfeeding, so they just give up and they don't continue breastfeeding. So why is there a lack of support? Well, healthcare workers are not trained in supporting on breastfeeding. So these are our causes, our underlying causes, and our causes for why women do not breastfeed their babies in the community. Then we want to think through the effects. So if women don't breastfeed, what can happen? Well, there's high infant malnutrition. And what can that lead to? That leads to high infant and child morbidity and mortality. Another effect, if women don't breastfeed, we've learned that they're instead providing their child with formula. And so this can lead to high childhood obesity. High childhood obesity can lead also to high childhood morbidity and mortality. So this is a very simple example of how we would think through that problem. Now, once the core problems and their causes and effects are identified and agreed upon and mapped out, then the team can reformulate the situation into an objective tree. So this is done by reformulating all the elements in the problem tree into positive, desirable conditions, or the potential project objectives. So let's transfer our problem tree into an example objective tree. So our problem was that women do not breastfeed their babies. Our objective then is that women exclusively breastfeed their babies for 6 months. We determined that one of the causes was that women don't know about the importance of breastfeeding. So we're going to turn that into an objective, which is that mothers do know about the importance of breastfeeding. And how will mothers know about the importance of breastfeeding? Well, widespread education materials and campaigns on breastfeeding are available. So this is something that we can actually do with our project. On the other side, our objective becomes there's a lot of support for moms with problems breastfeeding. And to help with that, healthcare workers are trained in breastfeeding. So our problems simply flip and become positive situation and objective. So the effects or the ends are that infant malnutrition is reduced, which reduces infant mortality and morbidity, and childhood obesity is reduced, which also reduces childhood morbidity and mortality. So that's a very simple example of how we do a problem tree and flip it into an objectives tree. Now this is an example of an objective tree for the livelihood sector at GNI Nepal. And while our practice was very simple, in reality, these analyses get very complex, and the trees tend to just branch out and out and out. So you'll likely end up with several layers of causes and underlying causes, and also several layers of effects. Short-term effects, long-term effects. And this is okay because this is the reality of the situation. So you might end up with something more complex like this. So commonly, the initial problem tree and objectives tree are far too big for a single project to address. So you're going to identify a lot of issues in the community, but we can't expect to address and work on all of those problems. So you'll need to select the most suitable for your project to focus on. And your team will need to decide which elements will be included in the project, which elements will not be included in the project, and what are some criteria that we can use to decide which ones we include and which ones we don't. So when narrowing the scope of the project, consider that the best project designs combine our target population's greatest unmet needs and their strongest assets and GNI's unique capabilities. So right here in this overlap is the best project design. While focusing the scope of your project from the larger objective tree, some criteria that you could consider in order to help determine what you include and what you don't include could be priorities. So what are the priorities of the community? Feasibility. Is it possible to make an impact in this objective in the amount of time that you have? Where do we have, as a team, the capability, capacity, and resources to intervene? Which area is aligned with GNI's mission? We want to, of course, stay within that realm. What are the government priorities? So it's helpful to be in line with government priorities as well. And within the time frame that you have, which objectives can you likely make a change in? And also want to consider sustainability and other organizations. So if there's other organizations working in this location on that same topic, you might want to consider focusing on a different aspect. So after refining the objectives, removing the ones that you're not going to focus on, you'll be left with a precursor to the preliminary results chain for your project intervention. So you'll go through each piece of the tree and cross-check with your criteria. Your team might determine, for example, that this problem is not among community's top priorities, so you will get rid of that part of the problem tree or objectives tree. And maybe this objective and problem is a priority, but your team understands that it's not feasible for you guys to make any change within the amount of time and the resources that you have. So you'll remove that. But this objective is something that's very much in line with GNI's strategic goals and results framework and your team's own capabilities. So you'll focus here and here. So after refining the objectives tree, removing the pieces that your team won't focus on, you'll be left with a precursor to your project design. And following completion of the above-mentioned assessment and analysis process, project teams will be able to fill in the PPW, the Project Planning Workbook. So GNI's PPW is the organization's standard form required for the assessment report of newly proposed CDPs. The PPW, along with the PPF, the Project Proposal Form, which we'll discuss more in Chapter 4, aim to simplify and enrich the logical flow of project site assessment and initial project design. So more detailed information and guidance on completing the PPW can be found in the PPW PPF User's Guide. So during the next session, session 3, we'll be discussing in detail how we'll use the information that we gain through the assessment and analysis in order to design a relevant project.